Welcome to our first gathering. These gatherings, we are making them to insist on the importance and the privilege of coming together. But these encounters are actually dedicated to those who cannot be here. Amongst those are actually our own Biennale team, who really deserve, they have done so much. It's really incredible. It's incredibly difficult to make a Biennale in the middle of a pandemia, and our team dealt with such a major amount of uncertainties that I really wanted to take this chance to thank them. I also want to thank the artists and participants of this biennial. This is their biennial. It's their positions that make this biennial what it is. And I also want to thank all of you who are here, who are able to be present. My name is María Berríos. I'm one of the 4 curators of this 11th Berlin Biennale. Lisette Lañado is another of the curators. And Renata Cerveto, who I don't know where she is, she's around there. Also another curator, and Agustín Pérez Rubio, who is not able to be here. Each of these gatherings, we hope, will provide a parallel entry into this, the crack begins within, to navigate these cracks that are among us and the cracks that we carry with us. Today's gathering is called Acts of Listening, Illness, Crisis, and the Labor of Care. And we will be navigating issues that deal with art and mental health, and looking into diverse acts of listening, ways of undoing psychiatric modes of listening. We will be hearing positions and voices that discuss different moments of stepping in and out of the hospitals and the health industry, and that experiment with non-objectified and non-diagnostic modes of listening and social relations. I will go through the program that we have today, so you all know what's going to happen. First, we will have some presentations that have been sent in by some of our participants that cannot be here. The first one is a pre-recorded self-presentation of their project by La Rara troupe. La Rara troupe is, as they themselves say, a community of excess. They were founded in 2012. And they were founded in a hospital in León, although as time passed, actually quite quickly, they moved out of the hospital. They found it impossible to work in the hospital, and actually started working inside a museum. And they considered this museum a space free of diagnosis. So this became a space for them to gather, to work together, and to create this community. You can see the piece, the 2018 film that this collective made called La Humana Perfecta. You can see this in Gropiusbau. And we will be seeing a presentation by Abel Morán, Belén Solá, Félix Lorenzo, Ángela María, Alfredo Escapa, Nuria Alejandra, Marcos de Matas, and Chus Domínguez. And it will be 15 minutes long. After this, we will hear a pre-recorded excerpt of an episode that is upcoming in Hospital Prison University Radio. This is a space, a self-organized radio and archive founded in 2016 by Jakob Jakobsen when he came out of a psychiatric unit of the hospital. It was founded in Copenhagen in the home that we share. And what we will hear is a dialogue with a sister radio called Radio Estación Locura. This is a radio founded by psychologist Ernesto Bouey, and we will hear a very small excerpt of a one-hour conversation that we had with Ernesto Bouey and artist Grace Weinrib, who was a participant in the radio. This radio was also founded in 2012 as La Rara troupe, and it was founded inside the Instituto Psiquiátrico José Horvitz Barak. The entire conversation deals with the radio as a non-therapeutic space, as a way of being together outside of diagnosis and illness, and how this inside the hospital tried to be a space to see and listen to each other as persons, as artists, and as makers, in their constant resistance to be instrumentalized as an occupational tool, which was a struggle, an ongoing struggle with the hospital itself. We will hear a small excerpt where Grace and Ernesto discuss how they came across the work of Óscar Morales, who was actually the first member of the radio, and how, if the radio is not a space of therapy, because they didn't want it to be, but at the same time, somehow the radio became therapy for the institution. The radio was therapy only for the non-patients. And you will hear the unskilled voices of these radios come together. Then we will hear a poem by Óscar Fernando Morales Martínez. Óscar Morales' work can be seen at Cave. He, as one of the members of this radio, had a section called Poeta del Pueblo, which means the poet of the people. And it's actually only a segment of this poem because the first stanzas were lost in the recording, but we have a translation of those first moments. But I will read them to you now, and you will get the translation later. The poem is called Soledad, un canto al amor, which means solitude, a song to love. Soledad gozosa, soledad amor, soledad plenitud, soledad espiritual, soledad preciosa, soledad canción, soledad juventud, soledad poesía, soledad hermosa, soledad meditación. This will be a first segment of what we will be experiencing together. And after this, we will have a conversation with the Feminist Healthcare Research Group, Inga Zimprich and Julia Bonn, who will present their zine, Being in Crisis Together, which I have on my lap and many of you saw outside. And this zine is actually their piece of their artwork in this epilogue moment of the Biennale. And we will be listening to them present their project and the many ways they have explored feminist and alternative healthcare and radical therapy since the 1970s, and the ways that they have been gathering, exploring, and putting to use those tools. They will be telling us a little bit about Weglauf House, the Anti-Psychiatric Information Center. And I think their intervention is very relevant. I remember the conversations that we were having in the space that's on the other side, in our little space on the other side of the building. And many of the conversations ended up asking, but why is healthcare political, or how is healthcare relevant to art? And I think it's quite meaningful to know that there are people that have been reflecting on this for many years, for decades actually, and I think this is a question that now, amidst this pandemic situation, there is no doubt that this is a very relevant part of our lives and the ways our bodies can be in space. I also wanted to mention that this event is recorded. The camera is right there. And it's being recorded particularly for the reason that I mentioned in the beginning. This is for those that cannot be here, so this recording is for them. And I also wanted to mention that I will be pulling out my phone in the moment that we listen to Óscar's poem, because his poetry has actually only ever been present on Estación Radio Locura. And for him, it is a very important moment to know that this poem has been translated and that people are hearing it in this space. So I just wanted to tell you that, so you know. He will be listening with us. So thank you again for being here, and let the gathering begin.
Alargar un poco Dani en la bañera. Quitar Lynch Nonia. Bolsa Ángel Guay. Plano hierba negra muy largo. Quitar Fade Out de Marcos, el acorde de fondo. Saltos sonoros en 4 imágenes. Lejía de Dani, sonidos golpes y graves. Unir bajos con el tema de Marcos V. Inés Oso fuera. Voz últimamente demasiados pops. Ángel sube el peldaño, poner 2 voces de Blanca. La rara troupe somos un grupo, un conjunto de personas que desean hacer una peli, todos juntos. Pensar, hablar, pensar, decidir, filmar, editar, todos juntos. Por eso es la rara troupe decisiva, para mí. Ese deseo de hacer una peli es ya buscar un sentido a la peli. La rara troupe busca un sentido en sus acciones, decisiones, grabaciones, ediciones. La rara troupe es sentir. Sentir los demás. Chus, Belén, Nonia, Félix, Alfredo, Marcos, Lidia, Carlos, Susana, María Jesús, Blanca, Inés, Ángel. La rara troupe es el sentido.
Se me hace un poco complicado explicar qué es para mí la rara troupe, cómo me relaciono allí, qué la define y cómo me define sobre todo a mí dentro del grupo. He pensado que tal vez a partir de las primeras grabaciones que tomé cuando pensamos en constituir un grupo de personas unidas un poco bajo el tema de la salud mental, ¿no? De qué era eso, de la salud mental, de cómo nos podemos cuidar nuestra salud mental, de cómo podemos saber qué significa el estar mentalmente estable, sano y preparados para vivir situaciones, momentos y sobre todo, bueno, una vida que a muchas personas se nos hace complicada, se nos hace demasiado nos genera demasiadas contradicciones, ¿no? Y todo esto a veces te hace dudar muchísimo de ti, de tu persona, de qué se supone que tienes que hacer para para vivir en sociedad y cómo, ¿no? El estar también socialmente aceptado en lo profesional, en lo personal, el cómo encajar.
Al acercarme a la rara troupe, lo que encontré es un espacio de comodidad en el cual la creación y sobre todo la reflexión, la puesta en común de tu visión del mundo, fuera parte del trasfondo que pueda tener psicosocial, que me hizo replantear mi propia estabilidad mental. Supone un trabajo cada semana, una puesta común un día de la semana, la realización de talleres de aprendizaje y sobre todo es un espacio cómodo en el que se diluyen las individualidades para formar un mensaje común. Ese mensaje común es un resumen de todo ese trabajo, con lo cual yo con lo que me quedo es con el hacer de cada día que se realiza entre semana, la puesta en común de tus puntos de vista, el diálogo, un diálogo que lo que no hace es formar un grupo, digamos, de amistad, sino un grupo de personalidades transformadas en un mensaje.
Creo que somos básicamente exceso de emociones, exceso de imágenes, exceso de cámaras, exceso de sentimientos encontrados muchas veces, exceso de vivencias, excesos. Somos una troupe excesiva. Por otro lado, creo que hay una palabra que define muy bien para mí la rara, que es comunidad. Sin ella probablemente yo hace tiempo que no estaría en la rara troupe, porque gracias a esa comunidad soy lo que soy y somos lo que somos. Y otra que siempre me atrae mucho de la rara troupe es la búsqueda. Esa búsqueda constante en no conformarse, en que no nos conformamos nunca con lo que en un principio incluso estábamos buscando, que nos damos la oportunidad a estar buscando un tema y encontramos otros por el camino mientras hacemos una creación y nos dejamos invadir por ese sentimiento de este es el tema, este es el tema que estamos tratando, que tenemos que tratar, que tenemos que vivir, ¿no? En ese exceso comunitario. Y otra palabra que también, claro, que tiene que ver con esto, que creo que es perderse. Creo que es muy importante para Rara que nos perdemos habitualmente. Bueno, por lo menos yo me pierdo. Perdernos para no encontrar nada y encontrar todo.
Yo llegué a la rara con otro tipo de enfermedad y enfermedad mental y mucho dolor de ese que rompe y que tienes que ir canalizando, que envuelve la cabeza y a veces no sabes muy bien dónde colocar todas esas cosas. Sin darte cuenta vas viendo que allí hay un grupo de personas que te van involucrando en sus problemas, en su vida, y a la vez no te involucras en nada como personal, no sé, nos mantenemos un poco a veces en distancia. Yo tenía esa sensación más bien al principio, llegaba, trabajaba, me iba, pero no tenía el sentimiento que tengo ahora emocional con el grupo. Yo llegué por mi enfermedad y por mi fragilidad mental y se convirtió también en una alegría. Empezamos a trabajar en comunidad y sobre todo yo me di cuenta de que el trabajar en comunidad era cuidarnos, pero trabajamos en comunidad sobre todo cuidando la diferencia, porque en sí lo que a mí me ayuda y me ha ayudado todo este tiempo ha sido el estar juntas, porque creo que es muy necesario y más ahora. Me da un poco de tristeza, no es tristeza tampoco, porque tristeza son muchas otras cosas, pero sí que me gusta cuando trabajamos juntas y ahora pues la pandemia y los problemas que hay nos hacen trabajar como este año cada uno desde casa. Y aún así me parece que el reto ha sido muy grande y hemos conseguido seguir juntas, seguir uniendo los afectos y no sentirnos solas.
Y la Rara True es un centro de compañeros que trabajamos y estudiamos sobre la educación y la cultura. Empezamos trabajando en el 2012 sobre la salud mental, que trabajamos la salud mental en torno a la antipsiquiatría, porque estamos en contra de la psiquiatría por los medios que toman desde ya años atrás, y actualmente la psiquiatría no resuelve la enfermedad. Curan más unas palabras bondosas que unas pastillas. Unas palabras bondosas curan más que unas pastillas. Entonces trabajamos sobre la salud mental en torno sobre la antipsiquiatría. Hemos trabajado también en el malestar social, que la sociedad también lo pasa mal, bien por el trabajo, porque no trabaja, por el paro, por la pareja, por la mujer, por los hijos, un poco así en torno a la sociedad, que también sufre, entre comillas, esa palabra la que te lee el diccionario, la esquizofrenia, una esquizofrenia social. La sociedad. Hemos trabajado también sobre la diversidad de las personas, de la gente de género, la diversidad de género, sobre la homosexualidad, la bisexualidad, que sean aceptados la diversidad de género. Y es normal, hemos estado con compañeros homosexuales, bisexuales, hemos hecho trabajos con ellos, lo hemos entendido bien. Somos un grupo muy variado de ideas diferentes cada uno. Hemos trabajado sobre también la discapacidad física, también hemos trabajado sobre eso. Y bueno, nos lleva el grupo La Rara, Motor Rara, se enciende el motor y entonces es cuando nosotros La Rara empezamos a ir sobre la marcha, sobre lo malo y lo bueno que aprendemos sobre lo que trabajamos.
Uno no se da cuenta, pero desde hace 8 años que empezamos hasta ahora han pasado tantas cosas y ha cambiado tanto. Entonces yo creo que al principio ni siquiera hablábamos de salud mental, hablábamos de enfermedad mental, y eso como que lo marcaba mucho todo. De hecho empezamos trabajando en el hospital psiquiátrico, y como que enseguida nos dimos cuenta de que, bueno, que había que salir, ¿no? Del marco médico, ¿no? Del marco institucional a otros lugares. Y en ese salir, pues fuimos rechazando la palabra terapia. Siempre nos consideramos que la Rara Troupe no era un proyecto terapéutico. Pero con el paso del tiempo y ahora coincide que leyendo alguna cosa me he encontrado como como otra posibilidad de entender lo terapéutico, ¿no? En un texto del antropólogo Stephen Tyler leía que bueno, que para él una etnografía actual tendría que ser de alguna forma tendría que tener que ver con lo terapéutico. Y terapéutico un poquito vinculado a su sentido etimológico, a una raíz que aparece también en la palabra arte, en el ritual, y por ahí sí que puedo entender, ¿no? Que quizás podríamos aceptar, ¿no? Que somos
Un grupo que a través del arte y de unos rituales colectivos nos acercamos a tratar de encontrarnos, de restaurar una armonía, de trabajar desde el lado quizás irracional, no sé si diría poético, pero sí de muchas veces alejándonos de lo que habitualmente llamamos normal, racional, de lo común, y a través de separarnos de ahí podemos encontrar nuestro lugar en el mundo, en un mundo vivible para todos y para todas.
Hospital, prison, university, radio.
Ernesto was mentioning before that he created the radio in 2012. I was invited to the hospital by a friend in 2014. She is a psychologist at the hospital, and she invited me to see Óscar's work that was hung in a hallway in one of the buildings at the hospital. And the reason she invited me was to because there was sort of a problem regarding the conservation of the drawings. The drawings were hung in the hallway. That the hallway is like a very cold green mosaic, and the drawings were hung with a very sort of sticky piece of Scotch tape, or just like a very precarious kind of way to hang drawings. So during the period of time that the drawings were hung there, of course they were hurt by climatic things such as humidity or heat, or so the drawings were beginning to become damaged. So that's the main reason why I was invited to the hospital, just to see. It was on one hand to see Óscar's work, because my friend told me that she thought I would be interested because some of Óscar's work was related to some of the writings and drawings that I was doing. And on the other hand, I was invited to try to figure out a way to keep the drawings safe and to conserve them and to still have them hung in the hallway. So at that moment, as Ernesto, I've told him this story 1,000 times. I don't know how he can still stand it, but I became immediately very, I was hypnotized by the drawings, basically. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was absolutely incredible. I felt like a hidden treasure was sort of opened to me in some way. I'm talking about hundreds of drawings in a hallway. It was almost like a wallpaper of drawings. It was absolutely incredible. So my friend told me, well, if you want, you can meet Óscar, and you can maybe go to a radio session with Ernesto one day if you want. And I was like, sure, I would love to meet him. If Ernesto will have me, I'll go. I'd be happy to go. And that was sort of the beginning of it. And Ernesto was very kind to invite me, to have me. And I felt very, I felt many things. I remember that first session. I felt many things. I felt interested. I felt defied in a good way. I felt so many things with this group of people, which included Óscar, of course, that I just decided to see kind of where it would take me. So
maybe just to ask, now you're both talking about Óscar, but this is the Óscar Morales.
Yes.
That has, or still is living at the hospital or outside, I don't know, like he's still treated in that hospital at least. but maybe you could introduce him just a little bit.
Óscar lives in like in a protected home that is nearby the hospital, but he doesn't live inside the hospital. He goes to the hospital to do different activities and to assist to different workshops, but he doesn't live inside the hospital. And Óscar, I believe Óscar came into sort of his work or his identity as an artist later on in life. And well, Óscar is, it's difficult to talk about his whole history, but he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, I believe, Ernesto, when he was about 17 or 18, I think, when he was very young. And Óscar is a very prolific artist, to say the least. He is incredibly productive. He draws as we could speak, maybe. While other people are talking and sort of wasting their time talking, he's drawing, and he's making time very productive with his drawings.
Óscar he lives in Copiapó, but when he was diagnosticated, he must to translate to Santiago, because in Copiapó don't have psychiatric attention, and he get hospitalized in Santiago in hospital in the 70s. Yes, we are in dictatorship. How to say? Yes. And he never see his family again. He get hospitalized, and he don't see his family. That was the psychiatric institution many years ago in Chile. You must to go to hospital and don't see your family. He lives in a house, and he lived with another people who get a psychiatric diagnosis, and all of them are attended, receive attention from the psychiatric hospital. But is the logic to work with community? So the people came back to community, but in practice, the relation with hospital is too strong, and the people who live with them, the cuidador, the caregivers, are people who work for hospital. The social inclusion in Chile is very difficult, and the people who live in hospital is very difficult to have a work, non-protected work, or do another activities. It's very difficult. Óscar live in that conditions, in that situation. Yes, I think the history of Grace is wonderful. Because I know Óscar. I work with him at the radio, and Óscar give us and show his paintings, his works, and I ever told that I see his work, and I told, well, it's beautiful, but I don't know any more of that. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes. And one moment, Óscar want to show to other people his work, and in that moment, we think the group think we could mount and show, and the only space that we have was the pasillo, my office. See, at my office, this space, because in another place of hospital, they don't permit anything. But entonces, we begin to stick his sticks with scotch and on walls. And in that moment, Grace arrived. And Grace told us, what are you doing with that work stick in the walls? and we say, I don't know. We show his works. Grace told us, that is a great work. What are you doing? In that moment, we know, or we could see Óscar in his work. Yes, the psychiatric vision got me too. Yes, because I can't see anything. I only see certain things, and I don't see the artist, an artist here. Grace changed our vision. When Grace go to the radio, many members of the radio begin to share with us another artist pieces. For example, Jackson, who died 2 years ago, and Jackson never was do any work in paper, in cartón, ¿cómo se dice? En
cardboard.
But when Grace arrived to radio and told about the work of Óscar, the work of Jose, Jackson began to create art, and very impressive.
Hospital, prison, university, radio.
Soledad primorosa, soledad Olimpo, soledad amplitud, soledad amable, soledad misericordiosa, soledad inestimable, soledad origen, soledad creación, soledad injundiosa, soledad soñadora, soledad prontitud, soledad sabiduría, soledad estofa, soledad precisión, soledad azimut, soledad encantadora, soledad valiosa, soledad divina, soledad Ruth, soledad reina, soledad internet, soledad competición, soledad mágica, soledad devoción, soledad marinus, soledad bronceala, soledad amorosa, soledad autogenesis, soledad angélica, soledad guinalda, soledad graciosa, soledad paisaje, soledad artesana, soledad artística, soledad imaginación, soledad cercanía, soledad horizonte, soledad grandiosa, soledad santiaguina, soledad capital, soledad universal, soledad triunfal, soledad victoriosa, soledad universal, soledad grandiosa, soledad bordadora, soledad tejedora, soledad esperanza, soledad amistad, soledad simpatía, soledad inspiración, soledad erudición, soledad corazón, soledad encantación, soledad jardín, soledad flor, soledad fragante, soledad compañía, soledad parque, soledad bosque, soledad prado, soledad plaza, soledad paloma, soledad ermitaño, soledad cielo, soledad mares, soledad tierra, soledad amante, soledad brillante, soledad llevante. Soledad historia, soledad angelical, soledad maravillosa, soledad ideal, soledad especial, soledad inmortal, soledad portal, soledad magistral, soledad luz, soledad sol, soledad gol, soledad perfección, soledad tesoro, soledad riqueza, soledad oasis, soledad paraíso, soledad dichosa, soledad ganosa, soledad gentilísima, soledad querida, soledad amada, soledad cariñosita, soledad arreglada, soledad perdón, soledad marina, soledad pradera, soledad coral, soledad arrecife, soledad faro, soledad profunda, soledad galaxia, soledad telescópica, soledad ecuación, soledad firmamento, soledad estrellada, soledad millonaria, soledad santa, soledad milagrosa, soledad viva, soledad sonido, soledad movimiento, soledad sentimiento, soledad única, soledad pensamiento, soledad tecnología, soledad electrónica, soledad dormida, soledad escritora, soledad pintora, soledad inventora, soledad rebuscada, soledad campeona, soledad solenísima, soledad Santiago, soledad estrella, soledad 9 trillones, soledad bendición, soledad reprogramación, soledad estudiosa, soledad planificación, soledad roca, soledad filosofal, soledad diosa, soledad diosita, soledad cumbre, soledad árbol, soledad suprema, soledad prodigiosa, soledad salvación, soledad escultural, soledad musical, soledad cantante, soledad sonora, soledad balada, soledad romántica, soledad sinfónica, soledad completa, soledad repleta, soledad rellena, soledad conquistadora, soledad amor, soledad valor. Óscar Fernando Martínez, escritor, pintor y inventor chileno. Óscar Fernando Morales Martínez, el poeta del pueblo. Gracias.
Yeah, so we finished the first part of the presentations. One thing that I forgot to say is that we actually have the possibility, if you would like to make a comment, we have little covers for the mics, and they're disinfected if anybody wants to say something now. And if not, we can continue with Inga and Julia and then open the floor after. Yes? Okay. So Inga and Julia. Thank you. And I will just let both artists. You can have them off when you speak. That's why we have like an arena.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and for making it possible to sit in these very new corona-based conditions in one space or two spaces with each other. Also, hello to Jakob, who's sitting behind the glass over there. You could hear his voice before in the radio play. And we wanted to start by thanking you, Maria, for the invitation, for the context of today. For the context of the biennial and for the context of this evening, because I feel that our work is always also moving at the fringes of the art field with the question how we can stay and whether and how we want to stay within the art field, and whether it is possible and how it is possible to have spaces of encounter and spaces that also allow for being present with vulnerability in spaces in the art field, because we sense that very strongly, and I'm sure that most of you know this, that the art field is a very competitive field that is very strongly based on rivalry and on exclusions along a lot of different lines. And I think this struggle for what we can talk about and how we can be in spaces and how we can share in spaces is very important for us, and it was very beautiful to see these examples, for instance, of La Rara troupe. It was very beautiful to see. there's another thing I would like to say before we start, namely that we are not talking about the Weglaufhaus because we have no right or authorization to talk about a very important and beautiful antipsychiatric institution in Berlin. But we have an interview with Kim Vichera in our zine, where Kim speaks about their work at Weglaufhaus, and we would like to bring in some of those motives that are very inspiring for us. And then I'm going to say the last very big thanks to Tina Kaden, who's the person who has done the illustrations for this scene. We wanted to mention Tina up front. And then I'm completing our introduction by saying that I'm Inga, and this is Julia.
Hi, hello. It's good to be here. I'm a bit excited. I'm going to say something about our group and our background. And we founded the group. Feminist Healthcare Research Group was founded in 2015. And in the beginning, we were a group of about 12 or 13 cultural workers. And we decided from the beginning to work collectively and research collectively around the topic of health, and to research and to empower ourselves, and in the end also others to find sorry. I'm so excited that my words are missing. Can you jump in?
Yeah. We skipped another part of the introduction. Can I jump back there? Yeah. We wanted to say that during COVID-19, we receive a lot of attention as Feminist Healthcare Research Group, and you have all noticed that there's a lot of discussions around care in the art field, and somehow we are very happy that the topic of healthcare and care arrives in a field that we're working in, but we would just like to say this again, that it's also that of course the idea is not that we're going to have a series of group exhibitions on the topic of health and of care, and then we just move on to another topic. But the idea of talking about care in the art field is to look at the ways we are working and we are producing and we are showing and receiving art in this context. And maybe just as a short excursus, that when we talk about care, we are talking about a counter model to the idea that we are all independent, autonomous subjects who are self-sufficient and take everything from within ourselves. We are efficient, flexible. In the art field, very often we are overworking and we are buffering precarity through class privilege. And the way we hope we can encourage each other through this work and through the works of like Sickness Affinity Group and other initiatives is that we join our efforts to think about how we can change the way we work in the art field, and we offer conditions of meeting and gathering and producing and viewing in the art field. And then we go back to the way we started in 2015. Möchtest du dahin zurück?
I can continue now. Yeah. I collected myself again. So we started and decided already to start a collective research and find our own ways of meeting people and researching and developing our own methods to work around the field of health. And we decided also to start from our own experience rather than making it an abstract and like science-based kind of way of researching, but starting by discussing and meeting and exchanging and practicing what we learn and letting it also influence our own lives and our own ways of getting together and being together. And also we were both, and the group like this had conflicts and dissolved. We were then three people working together. After a while, we were only 3, and we were all mothers of young children, which had a big influence on our way of working together, on our way of meeting, and our way of being with time, and with we were meeting, and one of us was maybe too tired, one of us was maybe cooking, one of us was working the to-do list. So we all had different capacities and different needs that we were already able to make part of the group and part of our way of working together. So when we were then developing methods that would not be intimidating, and that would allow people to connect, and that would also allow people to bring in their own experience. And methods we developed were that we started producing zines, that we would pass on our knowledge, the knowledge that we researched, in the form of zines, which is also like a very, in the beginning we were printing them at the photocopier, and it was low cost, and it was like it was kind of what we could do at that time. And it's more professional now, risographed. Proofread. Yeah, it's all, yeah. It's a development. And the other methods we developed were we were giving workshops. This was we already started this in 2015, passing on what we learned from initiatives and from places that we visited in workshops where we could share experiences, and where we could also share exercises. We started building a research library with publications from the 70s and 80s, because we found out that there were a lot of places working around alternatives in healthcare and in empowering methods of healthcare in the 70s and 80s, and that a lot of publications were very cheap to buy now, antiquariat, and also publications, other zines from other groups that we meet and that we exchange with. Yes. Would you like? And exhibitions, yeah. Would you like to continue?
Yeah. Yeah, we worked on one larger topic, which was the health movement in Berlin in the 70s and 80s, and we created an exhibition with archival materials around introducing those initiatives. And this exhibition we showed here in Experience 2, so in the small space of the Berlin Biennial behind here at Ex-Rotaprint in November 2019 to 2020. And on one hand, we aim, even though there's a lot of reading material and a lot of resources and documents, we try to create encouraging displays that don't feel overwhelming and that don't suggest that you should be very knowledgeable of these things if you want to engage with them. And we had a chance to show these materials again and created a small subgroup that was going together to visit a few more initiatives that are working today in Berlin on alternative counseling, radical counseling, anti-racist counseling in the city. And we had 5 meetings with a smaller group, mostly cultural workers, also members of the Critical Medics in Berlin or Basta Erwerbsloseninitiative, kritische Medizinerin, Basta. There was something similar. If it comes up, I will mention it again. And we visited 3 places. One is GLAD e.V. It's a black, indigenous, and of color, queer-centered place that is offering consultation and counseling in mental health crises, and also refers people to specialists. And we met with Space to Grow, which is a project by and for refugee women that is hosted or associated with Frauenkreise, and they offer support, consultation, and workshops for refugee women on reproductive health and on how to navigate the German healthcare system. And lastly, we visited again the Antipsychiatric Information Center, and there is the kind of home institution, the Weglaufhaus, thus the runaway house, which is situated in an old villa where people can go in acute emotional crises, especially people who have had, who have experienced violence in psychiatry in crisis before. And we would like to look at this a little deeper, because when we were meeting there and speaking to Kim, Kim was saying that political activism is not only about fighting, it is also about creating structures and spaces for ourselves and others to be who and how we are without violence. And to us, this was somehow a key quotation when we are thinking about healthcare today in terms of so many narratives around the way we all navigate health situations, situations that are in which we need help or we apply for support, and those are very often situations where violence is at work. We recently spoke to Karen Balin, who's the author of Blackfishing the IUD. So for people who are not as good in English as me, it's the copper coil. And Karen was sailing as a kind of standard contraceptive method. And Karen was saying how often patients are kind of planning their act when they go to the doctor, and how much pain you have to show in order to be taken serious, and how little pain you should show in order to not be understood as hysteric, for instance. Or we were thinking of a collective called Ginformation. They have set up a website, I assume German-wide, where people can report and give advice from their experience and their positioning, where they have been treated at doctors, reproductive health, gynecologists, midwives, where they have been treated respectfully and have been accepted with their full being. And this idea of violence being at work in healthcare-related situation has a lot to do with, I feel personally, with having learned to feel shame for our wish to be taken serious with our whole presence, with our biographies, with our gender identity, with our self-identification, with trauma, as the full person who is there. And I think that is often a very hurtful encounter with medicine that we have learned to carefully navigate that wish and the concern or the worry that we encounter maltreatment or So the Weglaufhaus and respectively the Antipsychiatric Information Center is offering somehow a perspective on how we can imagine places in which we can be with crisis without experiencing them necessarily as a threat to ourselves and others only, or how we can be in crisis without violence, basically. Also destigmatizing mental health in our context and the way we are spending time with each other, also meaning to create space where we can be present with our emotions and our ugly feelings and our negative feelings in group constellations and collective work situations. And particularly they advocate for destigmatizing and tabuisierung of mental health and emotional reactions and work we do in our contexts. Just pass back to Julia.
Mm-hmm. The workshop, yeah. I was going to say, we also, as part of Experience 2, gave a workshop called Being in Crisis Together. And we in this workshop we're already working with like methods and exercises around sharing experience of crisis. For example, to looking back at previous crisis and asking ourselves what has helped me before in crisis. What was like what kind of things, foods or music or exercise or which people, which contexts were actually supportive in crisis, which is actually one of the questions that is asked in Beckloff House when people actually arrive there, and it's working without diagnosis and without a therapeutic setting. But one of the main questions is being asked, what has helped you before in crisis? And we encountered this question already when we visited the Anti-Psychiatric Information Center actually in 2015 for the first time. And I feel it is quite it's quite an important leading question that has in a way supported our work for this whole time in a way. And it also gave us, it empowered us in a way to work with these methods in this context, in the art context, and use it in workshops without being an expert or without bringing in knowledge, because we were still researching and we were still learning and finding out and not being like, so in our workshops we wanted to be like a non-hierarchical situation that actually gives space for people. I'm diverging from our script. But in our zine, we actually we have these 3 interviews with the 3 places that Inga mentioned before, but we also have parts from the workshop, and we also give methods that are helpful maybe in crisis, that are like many methods, and it's for everyone to kind of find out which are the ones that are supportive in a particular situation. And it also gives a lot of resources. We have collected many resources and places that are that are supportive. We feel that are supportive, offering support in situations of crisis in the widest sense. Can I pass back?
Yeah. Yes, and I think we just hope that with the zine and the work, and also the work of groups that we are learning from or that we are part of, like Sickness Affinity Group, or artists like Romilly Alice Walden and people around us, that we help each other to stop hiding our care obligations or our anxieties in social gatherings, or naming when we're exhausted, or shifting meeting times, not hiding our children, not hiding our access needs, supporting each other to advocate for access needs, stop being shamed for having needs and for voicing our needs in order to fit into ableist frameworks, but really to just strengthen each other when we are working in these frameworks and gradually changing them. And in that sense, we would like to use the zine as an encouragement how to ask for help better, more explicitly, how to say no when we get offered help that we didn't ask for or we don't want, or listening in how we can offer help, what kind of support we can offer. Learning that we do not always need to help, for instance, that we can have boundaries or times off. And yes, we hope that this is going to be passed on and useful. And we wanted to thank the places we visited for them being so generous to share their experience with us. And also the people who were in the short research group with us. And now I actually wanted to look them up. Do we have them on the impressum? Yeah, so I have them. That's Natascha Bub, Jakob Jakobson, Johanna Klingler, Iwai Lee, Stasia Mrosinski, Rani Le Prince, Romy Rüger, Clara Watermann, Annika Welte, Lauren Juden, and Christina Zück. And they have been with us in these 5 meetings. And then we pass back to you, Maria, and of course to you as we enter a discussion with each other.
Thank you both. Really, it's been a really amazing experience for the biennial to work with you and learn with you, as with many of our artists, also the ones that we presented before. Now I would like to open the floor, and getting indications from camera. I would like to open the floor and also say, if any of you do not feel comfortable using the microphone, you can also just speak up, and then whoever is answering can repeat the question or make a summary. So then we have different kinds of possibilities for comments, questions, and whatever the floor would like to state or do.
And you can also ask in German and we translate.
Or Spanish.
And we still have hopes that there's going to be translation to German Sign Language of the recording. We still have hopes.
We hope, yes. And another, giving you time, you should know that the zines are on sale at this very second, outside on the table, but that you can also purchase them through the webpage of the Feminist Healthcare Research Group. We know how to wait and be in silence. It doesn't stress us.
There's the next question coming, but maybe you ask the question and I just repeat your question again then on the microphone.
Yeah. I'm just so impressed by your access to bring vulnerability and anxiety to a space like art, which I always experience as something can be very cool, or I don't feel very comfortable in those circles. So
darf ich schon mal wiederholen? Anna feels impressed about the way we introduce vulnerability and anxiety to a place like this that for you often feels like to the art field that for you feels often like cool or kind of distant, not very accessible, not very warm. Mm.
As I understood, it's also kind of a mission of you to make it more public or discuss this more.
As I understood, it's also a mission of yours to make this more public and discuss it more.
And I would like to know whether you made some experiences about your questions in the artwork already. Do you have any reactions on this? How people refer to it?
And I would like to hear, do you have any reactions on this? How are people reacting to it? Do you get feedback on this, right?
Or sharing experiences?
Us sharing experiences? People are sharing experiences with us? I have the feeling that I think we were also surprised that so many people feel related to the work of the Feminist Healthcare Research Group from the start, from like maybe the first public thing we did. And I think it has to do with that we all have experiences of sickness or illness or weakness or moments of needing to suppress things. And I have the feeling that maybe we started talking about this at a moment where a lot of people felt very uncomfortable with situations they were getting themselves in, and it was somehow offering a helpful tool or vocabulary to relate to say, actually, I always feel so uncomfortable in spaces like this. Or we had invited the fatigued, exhausted oracle, the passionate, fatigued oracle from the Sickness Affinity group, and people were sharing questions that we would all collectively answer to. And somebody anonymously wrote down, why do I always need to stand? Like, why in all these art events do we need to stand? Why is there not comfortable seating? Or, or why am I embarrassed if my child is loud? Or, right? Like, I think we all have all these observations all the time, and somehow we don't dare to talk about it. And then when somebody is saying this, not saying that we are very good in saying that or very early, but I think a lot of us are longing for a moment of connection to say, yes, I'm tired of this. Why does it need to be like this? Why is it on the third floor and there's no information on accessibility? And in the course of this, we have also been learning a lot. But I think this is the feedback we got very often, that people say, I'm just feeling the same thing. So I think that's why it was easy for us and for other people to connect to each other through this work.
Die nächste Frage. Yeah, I just wanted to maybe add that I think this is the personal reactions of people that are part in our workshops, and then there's also like a kind of interest in, like, I would say maybe an institutional kind of interest in like people working with this, like where I'm not sure whether it's like a trend in a way, or how nachhaltig it is, that how sustainable it actually is, that we put a lot of work into how can we make workshops accessible, and how can we like create this situation of where people feel welcome, and where there's this creation of warmth and low hierarchy, flat hierarchies, or actually creating situations of exchange. I like how sustainable this is institution-wise. I'm not so sure, actually. But I think from the individuals, the reaction is always very heartfelt. Yeah.
We have different encounters with larger institutions where I have the feeling we are dealing with ableist institutions where everybody has learned to suppress their needs. So then it's very difficult to change that for an event, because we are used to budget access needs as the very last thing when everything else is already planned. And this is just how we're trained and how these institutions run. I know that the biennial team was struggling with a very big bureaucratic apparatus of how you run a biennial long ahead with a lot of funding. So I think, ideally, at some point, these structures are moving to an extent that maybe needs can come much earlier. Hattest du eine Wortmeldung? We had another question.
Ich hatte eigentlich nur vor, eine Kleinigkeit zu sagen oder eine Anmerkung zu machen. Und zwar, das alles findet ja im Kunstkontext statt. Das ist nicht mein Kontext. Ich kenne mich da ganz schlecht aus und kann von daher auch die Zusammenhänge schwer herstellen. Aber was mir aufgefallen ist, mir hat der Film unglaublich gut gefallen und auch die Poetry und alles Mögliche, obwohl ich nur alles ganz schlecht sehen kannte. Also ich wollte eigentlich nur sagen, dass ich es sehr schön fand und dass es gelungen war und dass ich mich freue, dass es so ist. Ich möchte trotzdem jetzt nochmals zu den ganzen anderen Sachen sagen. Also ich kenne mich natürlich in dem Behindertenkontext aus, ich kenne mich in der Antipsychiatriebewegung aus, ich kenne mich in dem feministischen Kontext aus, ich kenne auch das feministische Frauengesundheitszentrum von früher. Deswegen ist mir das nicht unbekannt. Ich würde nur gern was ganz anderes dazu sagen, aus einer anderen Perspektive. Ich habe angefangen vor einiger Zeit darüber nachzudenken, warum im Moment eigentlich so viele Bücher, so viel Literatur zu Krankheiten verlegt wird, also seit ungefähr 15 Jahren. Also es gibt eine unglaublich große Beschäftigung in der ganzen Gesellschaft mit Krankheit, mit Tod. Also es wird ganz viel darüber geschrieben. Und ich dachte mir, woher kommt es? Das ist ein bisschen wie wenn ein neues Genre entstehen würde. Also es ist so, dass plötzlich sowas gibt wie Krankheitsstorytelling. Also ich weiß schon, also es hat sehr wenig mit dem allen zu tun, was ihr sagt, weil das eine ganz andere Draufsicht ist. Aber ich wollte trotzdem mal sagen, dass ich das eigentlich bemerkenswert finde. Und das steht dem anderen auch ein bisschen gegenüber. Das war alles, was ich sagen wollte.
Mir fällt eine Gruppe. Hast du auch gerade Deutsch gesprochen? Should we have a translation? Should we translate? I completely forgot to remember what you were saying. This person was saying they know a lot of the things we have been talking about from the past. For instance, the feminist healthcare, the feminist women's health center, the feministisches Frauengesundheitszentrum from the past, and you are informed about disability rights movement and the feminist movement, and you don't feel very literate in the art context, and you enjoy it very much, especially seeing the first film and listening to the poetry, and that's what you wanted to share. And but then you were also coming from another perspective, saying you're observing that in the last 15 years there's been a lot of writing on health and illness and death also, and you have the feeling it's like developing a new genre in literature, that it's really coming up. Jetzt habe ich bestimmt was vergessen, aber kann ich dich gar nicht durch das Glas hören. Durch die Glasscheibe kann ich dich gar nicht hören.
Also ich fand es einfach interessant, dass es entstanden ist. Das sind ja oft Selbsthilfebücher gewesen oder halt Fiction. Also es ist ganz unterschiedlich, auch auf ganz unterschiedlichen Niveaus, also von literarisch wirklich gut bis halt einfach, so war's und blöd und ihr seid alle Arschlöcher und sowas. Ich fände es einfach interessant, mal zu gucken, welcher Diskurs da bedient wird, mehr oder weniger, auf der Ebene.
Just adding that it's interesting for you that it's such a variety of publications on this topic, and that you think it would be interesting to look into that, why and where this is coming from. Und jetzt wechsle ich kurz zu meiner Sprecherstimme. Now I'm changing back to my voice. I would just like to give a brief response in English. Is okay, no? I'm thinking of the artist group Canaries that was founded much earlier than us, I think. I think initially they were New York based, but they moved mostly digital now. And it's a group of, I think, trans and non-binary and female-identified cultural workers with autoimmune diseases, and they are a support group, a self-help group. And they are called the Canaries, and I never understood why they're called the Canaries, because I just wasn't aware of this image. So the Canaries of the coal mine, it was a strategy when people were digging in like mountains, like mining. You would send a bird into the tunnels of the mines, and if the bird would come back, it would mean that there was Sauerstoff, oxygen, so humans could go in. And they call themselves the Canaries of the coal mine, as the people who are just experiencing things earlier, probably, as other people, because they are sensitive to when you enter a taxi and somebody has this Tannenbaum or something, and you are sensitive to smells, then this is not a welcoming environment for you. So how do you navigate your surrounding if you are like sensitive to these things? So that's why they chose this title, and I have the feeling that maybe this wave of publications around health and care has a lot to do with sensing things that people are anticipating for the future, that the way we relate to our environment is changing, and it has a consequence in our body. And I thought to pass also the mic to you, because the Biennial has been working very closely in this neighborhood. I was just thinking, with the perspective you brought in, whether there's something you would like to say, especially about the works you brought in.
Well, I mean, I think one thing is quite... It was really difficult, actually, to decide to do this gathering in particular because of the whole tradition of outsiderness and the way that illness is framed. So actually, it's not new. It's been there for a very, very long time. And for the biennial, this is a challenge because we didn't want to create these compartments, to follow these compartments, and actually the whole point was to challenge these compartments. So it was quite difficult to decide to focus, for example, our first gathering on crisis and illness and different modes of listening, because then you feel again how do you cope with that situation? I mean, for those of you who are not familiar with this tradition of outsider art, it's basically a way of saying that all of this is not art, or it's a kind of special art, and actually it's not. It's art. I mean, that was a little bit the point of within this conversation with Grace and Ernesto. This was a very interesting discussion that they were having, that for Ernesto, he was really clear about his how completely useless his whole psychological brain set, how brainwashed he was by being a psychologist working in a psychiatric hospital, even though the entire time he was really frustrated with the hospital and he was trying to create a different kind of space, and he was confessing that this was impossible for him, that when a patient would say, I have a delusion, he would only hear the diagnosis, even though he really consciously wanted to move out of that space. And the two museums that we are showing in Gropiusbau, Museo César Osorio and the Museo de Imagens de Inconsciente, come from a tradition of psychiatrists that were already in the 30s saying, no, this is not to be read by a diagnosis. This is a work. And this work actually belongs outside of the hospital and in the museum. And they really made a big effort to do that. So those works that we are seeing in these collections that came from hospitals in Brazil at that time actually made it into these kind of canonical modern collections. And this compartmentalization of these kinds of works is still very prominent. And yeah, it's still an issue. And Óscar, for example, he's an artist. He knows this. There's a part of this conversation that we didn't hear where Grace says, my fascination with Óscar is that he knows he's the best artist in Chile. I mean, this is, and he is. I mean, I don't believe in the notion of the best artist, but he's absolutely an amazing artist. I don't know if this answers, or yeah, if it's a comment in that direction.
I just
I wanted also to add to your question.
I wanted to add to your question, Renata,
Yes.
curator.
No, because I was thinking also in the way you work.
I was thinking in the way you work that
I have to use.
If you want, I can repeat for you.
It's a bit straight. You don't
Sorry.
understand? Okay, I take this one.
Is this Corona? We are trying to deal with the covers of the microphones.
Okay. Maybe then I come here better. I was also thinking in the way you work. I wanted to first to thank you for your presentation, and also because we were all witnesses here, at least for me, for the first time, on the way you work and the way you develop your research. And I have to say that for me it was very nice and very nurturing also to see how you are developing these methodologies in between these fields, no? Because also I am not an expert on healthcare movements or on anti-psychiatrist movements. It's not my field.
knowledge, but I do like and I do appreciate a lot the way that you share the methods that you develop together with other people. And I think it's super necessary even more today, because for the context, the situation we are undergoing, also to contemplate that if before art was an exclusive space, how much it is even more now with the COVID. So I also was wondering how these questions or these new ways of being between us, also maybe in the art world, but also when we connect with ourselves, is also triggering you to think about these new methods, because also for the way you work, in workshops with people, now I guess that you are also thinking how to work in a different way. At least for us, what you were asking, Inga, it was very challenging, as Maria said, and very difficult to understand how to do this in a safe way. Also contemplating the people, the workshops that we did here, also, for example, for the children of the neighborhood, we were responsible for them, every time they came, and for the workshops we did in May and in June. So I think we are all learning from this every day, but I was wondering how you integrate this in your own practice also from now on, because what I really like about the work you are doing is that, as you said, it's not that you present an exhibition on the topic, but it's an actual constant research that you are doing. And this is what I also find very, very powerful, no? This is like an open question, but I just wanted to tell you.
I can already say a couple of things that we are learning and moving also more digitally, because there was, for example, one workshop that Inga was supposed to give around the topic of crisis, actually, and it was cancelled because of the lockdown, and then we decided to make a podcast from it, which is actually, we also transformed it again and put parts of it into the zine later, but to make it it's not interactive as a podcast, obviously, but it already gives exercises that people can press pause and then do some writing or do some reflecting or do a body exercise while listening to this format of a podcast. And this was new for us as well. And now that we are thinking whether we can travel or not, we are also thinking about offering workshops online, which we haven't done yet, but at least it's an option. And I think it's also interesting because many people in the disability rights context have advocated for using digital formats and remote formats because of if people can't attend because of some accessibility issues, it would be a good option to attend digitally, and there was always or do home office or something like that, and there was always this reason of no, there's too many technical problems and the internet is not good enough, and now suddenly it has all moved online in a way, which is what you said about the Canaries, no? That it's anticipating or working for something that if suddenly everybody needs it, it's all possible somehow. And before it was only a few people needing this kind of access and it was not possible. And now suddenly it's made possible in a way. Yeah, so it would be very interesting for us to do a workshop online to see whether we can create this kind of atmosphere of closeness and having really, this kind of exchange that is possible when people are in a room, whether this is possible to create online, but I'm hopeful. I think you have to take the other microphone because of the cover. Yeah, I know.
Hi. I have to remember back to my question because from what you were just saying, I also had some doubts in terms of is it really, but anyway, I think I got your point. So first I want to state that I really admire your work. I'm have been a huge admirer of it for quite a while. And I have a bit of a difficult question in terms of it being difficult for me to ask, from maybe colleague to colleague, trying to work in social justice issues in the art world. I have been doing that for some years now, and my experience is that if you do this, and in all the workshop settings, there is this recurring paradox that violent relations reproducing themselves also in the workshop settings, which is kind of an unavoidable mechanism. And this relates especially to whiteness. And I would just very interested in hearing your experiences about it, how you are dealing with whiteness in your workshop settings, if that is okay for you.
Yeah, I think this is where once we painfully noticed how little work we had done on whiteness in a workshop without Julia, with somebody from the Ford structures, from Women Organized Radical Therapy, where I was in a situation where I realized my lack of work I had done around this, and then dealing with the situation of leading a workshop in which I felt I was giving a lot to make people safe, and then understanding that I was reproducing things I didn't do enough work on. And to me that created also a period of doubt on how I could continue educating myself and how I could work more on making frameworks that we offer safe for all people who are there. And on one hand, now I'm going like in my mind, I'm making a very fast circle to something I wanted to answer before. But I was practicing radical therapy for a while in Berlin, and there are a lot of active groups, and I'm also going through a process in which I'm critical of the methodologies, exactly for also not working intersectionally enough in my point of view. But what I learned in that was that I am reproducing exclusions in structures that I'm creating, and I can make effort to actively work against it, but I cannot, as I am right now, fully prevent this from happening. And I'm trying to be present with the fact that I am bringing things that are problematic and that hold violence in a way as responsible as I am able to do it right now. And we have internal conversations around our group, which is a duo, and we are both white people and able-bodied people, and it's a kind of long-term question how we can create changes in the way we work and in the way we ask people into the work and in the way we feel we need to inform other people about how we work and what we can offer and what we can't offer. So from my side, I have the feeling, experiencing myself painfully, how I have not been able to offer a safe framework for people. I'm trying to continue learning and working and trying to be also explicit in situations that we create, in the way we try to moderate at the beginning of a workshop, or where we feel we haven't done enough care, or where we feel there's maybe a limit of how we can be accommodating.
Are you gathering methodology on that as well?
I'm repeating the question. Are you gathering methodology on this question again? Yes, totally. And I mean, also in this zine, we are learning a lot from people of color, from Black and indigenous people, movements. We have dug so deep into second wave feminist and health movement work that has been often, but not exclusively, very white and very very much focused on binary gender concept, and often very middle class. And it's like very enriching for us to be able today, also with these technologies, to hear so many things as they're happening, and to hear a lot of to do very concrete exercises from people that come from the social justice movement in the US, especially through podcasts like How to Survive the End of the World, or there's also a discussion around it, but the Irresistible podcast was very important for us. And they share very generously methodology, that are just very useful and practical for me, and also for situations that we're in. And we try to be as transparent as possible about where we take exercises from or inspiration, for instance, in this zine now. Mm. But can I say something? I have been in a workshop of yours that was dealing with critical diversity literacy. That's the difficult word. And we were testing your toolbox. And it was, I just got so many practical advice from it. So I think, for us, the shift to say, if we present in an art space, but we do not make a lecture performance where we stand in front of the slide projector and we hold an object that we take from a social movement that a lot of people created, and then we kind of reintroduce it into the art field with our signature. But instead of saying, how do we make workshops, or how can we pass things on as directly as possible, and trying to point at things, this has a lot to do with learning from people who have given us an example to say, this is how you can work. These are 10 exercises, and you can read the question, turn it around, sit 2 and 2, take a break, right? I mean, I think this has a lot to do with how we are working today.
Could you just tell us what the name of the workshop is?
Would you?
It's in the making.
That's the
Carmen, yeah. No, I'm just currently working on teaching and learning material.
I think now the microphone is not on.
I'm working on a didactic material for making art spaces less violent, like they do, but in a more intersectional, like different categories, not only health or ability. And when we were working together in that workshop, I think I was at the very beginning of that, and now I hope to finish soon. It's actually not defined yet, but the concept I'm drawing on is from a white South African scholar, and it's called critical diversity literacy. Yeah. Diskriminierungskritische Lesefähigkeit. Sorry, yeah, I'm just surprised because I was just...
We're dragging you.
Yes, exactly, because I was actually gathering energy to ask this question, and now I'm suddenly in the focus. Her name is Melissa Steen. Sorry, yeah, Steyn.
I just wanted to bridge once more to something you were saying on whether this is art. It's like, of course, it's like a very triggering question to some of us in the room. But I have the feeling that your work came from education in terms of Vermittlung in the art context. And we were talking about encounters in the art field and also the institutional apparatus and how it's working. And I think the moment we are dealing with methods or with didactical methods where you wonder, how can I present a question in a way that somebody else can take it in and learn it? And your work, I think, is also dealing with that. I have the feeling that we have to change methodologies in this field if we want to change the field because we would like to stay in the field. And it's, I think, very important that we are not working about how can I stay in this field, but how can this field be a less violent field so that more people want to be in this field, because it is very abrasive and very extractive when we talk about outsider art. This is about a very diagnostic view of the art field on people who are worse to be implemented under our conditions, and working on those conditions, how something gets in. and under what conditions it can be inside, and what violence that those conditions produce. I think that's work we need to develop methods for if we want to not just disregard the field. No?
I want to thank you all for your amazing generosity in sharing these methodologies. But not only that, I think it's also about shifting the way that things can be said in this space, which is one of the most difficult things to breach. And I think so many people in this room have been doing work in that direction, in allowing ways of speaking that are not about filling the room with this overconfidence, but actually allowing a space for questions, actual questions, not rhetorical questions about posing specific hypotheses, but really creating the space of silence and of listening. Voices that listen are just so necessary, and I really feel that we have a lot of those in this space right now. So I would like to thank you and invite you to continue in the dark, in the outside, where your zines are flaming in the wind and waiting for us. So thank you so much for having been here tonight, and this is a message to all of those that are not here. Thank you.